Your book, and so it is entitled Pool Room Math. And so we're going to talk a lot about angles today. We're going to learn a lot about angles. And so first of all, we need to define what in fact an angle is. Okay, we need to define what in fact an angle is. And an angle, oops, had some problem, there we go. An angle is defined as two rays that share a common endpoint. Two rays that share a common endpoint. And so I have a diagram of what an angle looks like. Okay, this is just one example. There's a lot of them. Okay, the vertex is what we call the common endpoint. Okay, so where they meet, that we call the vertex. And in this case, this would be referred to as point Q. And then the sides of the angle are the two rays. And so in this case, we have ray QR and ray QP. So those are all figures that we've looked at before. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to name this angle, because this angle can be named like a segment can, a line can. And so this angle, okay, you can see there we use a little symbol for an angle. It's kind of like a sideways L. Okay, and so we can call this angle Q, which is named by the vertex. Now there will be some times when you can't name an angle Q. It's when the Q is shared by multiple angles. But in this angle, you can name this angle Q, so by the vertex. Or I could name this RQP or PQR. Now a little tidbit of information. The vertex is always in the middle. So whenever you name an angle, that vertex point always has to be in the middle. Okay. Questions? All right, let's look. Oh, skip them. Go back. So name all the angles in the figures. Woo! That's tough. All right, so we're going to go around the room. That group back there, give me one. And we're just looking right now at this figure. Let's just look at this figure right now, okay? We'll look at this first figure. Angle RU what? V. Perfect. Angle RUV. That refers to that angle right there. What would be another angle? U3.
TUV.
So you said TUV. Okay, that'll work. All right. What's another angle? That group.
RUT.
RUT. Oh, we have to go get the plug-in. RUT. Good. That group, what's another
Angle
one?
VTU.
What?
Angle VTU.
Angle VTU. Okay. That group, another one.
TUR.
Okay, that's the same as this. That's the same as this one. Okay. So what would be another one? One that we haven't used.
TVU.
TVU. Good. Now another one, believe it or not.
I didn't see it.
Now, you will see angles numbered just with numbers, and those work as well. Okay, you'll see a lot of that, like if you have a standardized test, like maybe on your ACT, they will actually number the angles, and they'll say find the measure of angle 1, find the measure of angle 2. Okay, so that's another way you can name angles. Let's look at the second diagram. Okay. All right, those of you that didn't get picked on the first time are going to get it this time. Okay, That group, name one.
XAY.
What?
XAY.
XAY, that'll work. Okay, XAY. And so XAY is going to be this one right here. That group. Another one. XAZ. That's going to be this one. Okay. This one right here. What do you got? This group?
YAZ.
YAZ. Yes. Yes, that'll work. Okay, any others in that one? Not too bad? Okay, let's go ahead and look at the next slide, see what we have. Here we go, the measure of an angle. So this is where your protractors are going to come into play. Okay. The measure of an angle is any value between 0 and 180 degrees. Doggone it, I'm having trouble with the... Here, let's, just a second, I'll fix it. There we go. So the measure of any angle is a value between 0 degrees and 180 degrees. Okay, notice there's a degree symbol there. And then the reflex measure of an angle. That is the largest amount of rotation between the two rays, but it has to be less than 360. It's the largest amount of rotation between the two rays, and it has to be less than 360. So an example of reflex measure is down here in this diagram right here. Okay. The measure of angle GPS is 136. That's GPS. But the reflex measure is actually 224 because that's the largest amount of rotation between the two rays, and it has to be less than 360. So let's just say for kicks, okay, kicks and giggles. All right. This angle's 40 degrees. What would the reflex angle be? 320. It's going to be 360 minus your 40 degrees. So to find the reflex angle, you're just taking 360 minus whatever the angle is. Shouldn't be too bad. So now we're going to talk a little bit about your protractor, which I gave to you. Your protractor is a little different because your protractor actually is open in the middle. Okay? But the protractor is how we use, how we measure angles. Okay, it's the tool we use. And so there are some steps when you're going through and using protractors to measure angles. The first thing is you're going to place the center mark of the protractor on the vertex of the angle. Now your center mark is located right above the 2. Okay, you see where there's kind of a horizontal line mixed with a vertical line. So that is going to be, okay, that is going to be the center mark. So you're not going to line it up with the bottom. You're going to line it up with that center mark. And so that's why they make them clear, so you can see through them. Some of them, depending on if you have like one of those plastic ones that are bigger, they might have an actual hole cut into the plastic, and that's what you line up with the vertex. Okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to then line up the 0 mark with one side of the angle. So here's the 0 mark. Okay, you're going to line it up with one side of the angle. So notice there are 2 zeros. There's a 0 on the left, and there's a 0 on the right. The problem with the one on the left, the difference is that the 0 on the left uses the outside scale. The 0 on the right uses the inside scale. Then what we're going to do is we're going to read the measure on the protractor scale, and we're going to be sure that we read the scale correctly. And so we're going to go ahead and look at some examples now. And so this is actually taken from your book. And so if you want to go through and do these together, I'm going to show you on the board how to do that as well. This is example B on page, what page is that, right? 40. Okay, so now, we're going to start with angle 1. Okay, we're going to start with angle 1. So very first thing, what you're going to do, okay, is you're going to go ahead and you're going to move your protractor And you're going to center your center mark on the vertex of the angle. So do you see how I've done that up here on the board? Okay, I moved my center mark to the vertex of the angle. Okay, that's the very first step. The next step now is then to line up the 0 edge with one side of the angle. So notice how I lined up this 0 edge. Okay, now if I'm looking at this, what am I using for my scale? Am I using those outside numbers or those inside numbers?
Inside.
The inside, because that's where I started with 0. And so let's see, wherever it crosses, that's going to be my measure. And so how many degrees is that?
16.
16. Does yours come out to be 16 degrees too?
Mm-hmm.
It might be really close. Now the thing about protractors and when you use to measure, you might be off a degree, generally no more than a degree. Okay, and so I give you that on your tests and worksheets and quizzes. It's called the fudge factor. And so I do give you that a little bit, you might be off. So if your neighbor got 15 and you got 16, as long as you're close in that respect. Let's go ahead and measure number 2. So remember the very first thing, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and place the center mark on the vertex of the angle. Okay, now you're going to line up the 0 degree with one side. It doesn't matter which side. I'm going to go ahead and line it up with this left side here. Now, at least on mine on the board, what scale am I going to use, the outside or the inside? The outside, because that's where the 0 started. And let's see where it crosses. It crosses right about here. How many degrees is that?
164.
164. Very good. What I want you to do right now is I want you to measure angle 3 for me. And we're going to see how you all do. Measure angle 3. So just hold on. Let's let everybody go ahead and get that measured. All right, did you get bigger than 90 or less than 90?
Bigger.
Bigger, okay? Bigger than 95 or less than 95?
Less.
Less than. What'd you get? Was it 91 or 92?
91.
91.
91.
Okay. So, 91 degrees. Nice job. Okay. So that's how you use your protractor. So now what we're going to do is let's look at this next one. It says 2 angles are congruent if and only if they have equal measure. And we talked about congruent. What was the definition of congruent? 2 words. Geometrically equal. That's what congruent is. And so what they're saying is if they have the same measure, we call them congruent. And that should make sense. Right? That should mean they're geometrically equal if they each measure 30 degrees. And so how we write that, and this is the important thing you need to get down. Okay, here's your 2 angles. If they are congruent, look at how we write that. Angle DOG is congruent. Remember, that's the congruent symbol to angle CAT. Now, you will see this a lot in the future, especially on your homework. When we get to bigger diagrams, they're going to say this angle is congruent to this angle. So you need to understand what that means. So that is congruent angles. Now an angle bisector, when we think of the word bisect, bi means what? 2. So this means an angle in 2 sections. So this is actually cutting an angle into 2 congruent angles. That's what an angle bisector means. Dividing an angle into 2 congruent angles. Now let's just say, for instance, I'm telling you right now that this big angle is 40 degrees. What would each of these angles be? 20, because that's what an angle bisector does. It cuts them into two equal parts. There we go. So now let's go ahead and look at this. It says, look for angle bisectors and congruent angles in the figures below. Name each angle bisector and the angle it bisects. So that's the first thing. So is this an angle bisector here?
No.
Is this an angle bisector here? Yes. What is the angle bisector? Be careful. What is it? Ray RP. That's one way. Or I could write it this way, RP, with the ray symbol above it. That is the angle bisector. Okay, it is a ray in this case. And what's the angle it bisects? SRQ. You could also answer that QRS. All right, do I have an angle bisector here in the third example? No. I don't have like one ray that actually cuts it into two parts. I have two congruent angles, but they aren't next to each other and they're not divided. So now it says to name all congruent angles in the figure. Use the congruence symbol and name the angles so there's no confusion. So first of all, do I have two congruent angles in this first figure?
No.
No. Do I have two congruent angles here?
Yes.
Okay, what are the two congruent angles?
SRP and angle P.
Okay, so SRP, and I'm going to put a congruent sign, is congruent to angle PRQ. That's all you do. That's what it means when it says use the congruent symbol. You just have to write this statement. Okay, what about here? Do I have two congruent angles?
Yes.
Angle.
YN. ON.
There you go. And so that's what you would need to write. So pretty straightforward. Okay, let's look at the next one. Basically, what happens on this one is this is talking about pool. And for those of you that have played pool, it's a lot about angles. And so one of the things about angles is if you were to hit a ball, okay, the incoming angle has to equal the outgoing angle. That has to be the case. Okay, so it's one of those things when you try and aim that so that you get the correct angle. And so, let's go ahead and look at this. Notice what it says here. It says use your protractor to find the measure of angle 1, which is the correct outgoing angle, A or P. So here, you're in your groups right now. I want you to go through these 5 questions. This is also taken from your book. So steps 1 through 5. Okay, once you get done with that, okay, this is what I need you to do. This is your assignment for tomorrow. 1 through 24, 31 through 36, 40 through 43. Okay, so once you get done with that,